welcome back to the channel. And today's something a little bit different. It's actually a response video, not really a very negative response video. I don't really believe in being negative towards people, but I was watching and very much enjoying Steve Donohue's coverage of Fellowship of the Ring, and the first chapter video that he put out concerning hobbits, he was not enamoured with. And I am a big Lord of the Rings fan. I'm just going to hold my copy up of Lord of the Rings here, and I'm just going to try to fight the corner for concerning hobbits a little bit. A few comments were made by Steve, which have a lot of merit, but I don't necessarily... Things can have merit and also not be wholly true, in my opinion, because, reality is it's a term of perception, really, for the individual. Concerning hobbits, as far as Steve is concerned, is too slow. It is not on point as far as plotting goes, and he thinks it is bad book writing. I happen to feel that those of us in the fantasy genre, which again, life imitating art, etc., obviously heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings, are very much used to this. We are used to a slow burn in our books, in our fantasy, in our world building. We are used to getting a slice of life before we're given a big mission, a big quest, and I feel like it is beautifully encapsulates this. I also know that many people believe the opening chapters before the Shire, people leave the Shire, to be some of the best work by Tolkien, some of the most enjoyable work, some of the stuff that is the most immersive and wants people to draw them into the world. People want to live in the Shire, people want to live like a hobbit. It's a real thing out there in the world. Other points made by Steve included the time lapse when Gandalf leaves the Shire. I always found it actually the opposite to Steve. I found it extremely jarring how Gandalf kind of just went away, and after a long weekend of hitting the library, he came straight back to say, oh look, we need to hide this ring, it's Sauron's ring. I always felt like in the book, the fact that he went away and we got to see Frodo grow up and kind of take over Bilbo's duties in the Shire, and then Gandalf has clearly he's travelled the land. He's trying to get reports from the Dunedain. He's trying to track Gollum down. He's trying to talk to the other Astari. He's trying to really look for any writings about the ring that may lead the ring that he saw at Bilbo's to make that connection that it might be the One Ring. And there's also the fact that there's many rings of power, and the whole point, the whole shadow rising, the Melkor malice, resurrecting Sauron in the edge of the woods. I think the whole point is the world is forgotten. The world has forgotten the threat because there's been no visible threat, and that's how evil grows in the hearts of men, and feeds into the malice that brings Sauron back. And if they hadn't forgotten, then the whole point is that people have kind of just thrown these scrolls away and have forgotten the past, and only really maybe Elrond is still kind of keeping a track of these things. And there were so many rings of power forged by Celebrimbor, and other than the ones we know are in Elven possession, they are lost. We don't know what happened to them. We assume one of these is the ring that Bilbo has, because it has this weird effect. We don't believe it is the One Ring until we find out later. One final point that Steve made that is very valid, but also for some of us just does not ring true, is that the book is kind of impenetrable unless you've read The Hobbit. That the opening chapters are a bit of a jumble unless you've read The Hobbit before. Well, first of all, this is a sequel to The Hobbit. And just like when you read any fantasy series, you usually don't jump in on book 2. So I think jumping in at the Fellowship of the Ring without reading The Hobbit isn't necessarily the best idea, and I agree with that, it's a valid point. But secondly, there are many books in the fantasy genre especially, and especially the science fiction genre as well, where we don't have a hand held at all, and that makes the book more enjoyable. Let's jump in the deep end and immerse ourselves in the world before we actually grasp the plot. Now, you can say that is bad book writing, But if every book did things the same way, it would be extremely boring to read books. I'm currently reading Dune, and that does not hold your hand. If you think this will send your mind on a trip when you first start reading it, Dune is a whole nother experience. And I think that is an excellently written book, and I love the way it starts, and I love the way the Fellowship of the Ring starts. I think if you haven't read The Hobbit, yes, you might have to take a few, an extra 100 pages or something until maybe you're as immersed as someone that read The Hobbit. But the world is so rich. You don't need to know everything that's going on straight away. That's the mystery. That's the fantasy. That's the discovery. Discovery is such a large part of fantasy, and questing and building of rich worlds. And I absolutely love the Fellowship of the Ring. So this is one for the Fellowship of the Ring. This is one concerning hobbits. Let's put it out there. Go watch Steve's stuff. It's excellent. I wouldn't be making this video if he wasn't making excellent stuff. So go check him out too.